Good afternoon, or still good morning for our West Coast friends joining us today. Thank you all for being here. We're going to give folks a few minutes to trickle in. We'll get started here in just 2 to 3 more minutes. Folks, I will make one quick announcement, and I'll share this again in our introductory materials. But as you're coming in, if you would, please just note that we are not going to be using the raise hand feature. Typically, that's something that we would have turned off, but we're just asking you all to reserve the questions and chats that you have for the Q&A box in the chat feature. We will not be using the raise hand function for this webinar. All right, about 1 more minute for folks to come in. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're so happy to see folks trickling in. I see a lot of familiar names, and that's fantastic. All right, I might as well. I got to give a public shout out to our friend Nick Doyle joining us from Ohio. Nick, it's great to see you on. Thanks for being here today. All right, folks, we will go ahead and jump right in. Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining the National Down Syndrome Society for today's webinar, Preparing Children and Adults with Down Syndrome for Employment. We're thrilled to have you joining us to learn about this incredible topic. And I just want to share briefly, my name is Ryan Rotundo. I'm the Director of Programs here at NDSS. I am a proud sibling to an amazing woman with Down syndrome. Before we dive into the content of today's webinar, I do want to share just a few housekeeping items to ensure that everyone has an enjoyable experience throughout today's webinar. So first of all, if you experience any technical issues during today's webinar, please use the chat function to notify our support team. We have folks standing by and they'll do their best to assist you as promptly as possible. Also, our presenter will answer questions at the end of the webinar. So we encourage you to submit your questions through the webinar or throughout the webinar, using the Q&A feature located near the bottom of the screen. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible during the designated Q&A time. Of course, we may not be able to get to all of those if we're unable to answer your question during the event, or if you have very specific questions that you would like to have answered. We will be sharing an email address toward the end of today's webinar where you can reach back out to us, and we will also be sharing contact information for our speaker, Amanda. This webinar is being recorded, and we will be sharing this on our YouTube channel and through the NDSS website within a few days after this webinar concludes. You will also receive an email with a link within a few days after this webinar and links to some of the resources and information that we mentioned in today's presentation. Please note that today's webinar may run a little bit longer than our typical 60-minute webinar. Obviously, if you have to drop off, we completely understand that, and we appreciate those of you who are attending for as much as you can today to get this information. Thank you so much for your attention, and we'll go ahead and get started. So founded in 1979, the National Down Syndrome Society's mission is to empower individuals with Down syndrome and their families by driving policy change, providing resources, engaging with local communities, and shifting public perceptions. NDSS supports and advocates for the Down syndrome community by focusing on 3 key areas of programming: resources and support, advocacy and policy, and community engagement. Under resources and support, NDSS offers a 1-800 helpline and info box email that anyone can reach out to at any time. We also develop resources and information covering birth to the end of life on all topics, including education, employment, health and wellness, aging, caregiving, and of course, Alzheimer's research and other amazing topics that are of importance to our community. We encourage you to check out these resources on the resources section of our website. Under advocacy and policy, NDSS advocates at the federal, state, and local levels. We develop and improve laws to positively impact people with Down syndrome across the country and affirm their human rights. There are some amazing programs that you can get involved in, including our DS Ambassador program. Would highly encourage you all to check that out. And under community engagement, NDSS also offers scholarships and grants. We lead the National Buddy Walk program, of course, at the national level, but also a lot of local organizations doing those incredible buddy walks, typically in the month of October. And we also do our Times Square video presentation. We run the Down Syndrome Ambassador program, as I mentioned earlier, and host a variety of awareness building and fundraiser opportunities throughout the year. Within our employment program specifically, we centralize this program around employment policy and advocacy, resource development, entrepreneurship, and self-employment, as well as private sector engagement, affiliate support, and highlighting successes within the Down syndrome community. If you or a loved one with Down syndrome is interested in sharing your success stories, we will provide a link in the chat here shortly. This includes information about, again, successes in employment, work training programs, and also self-employment or entrepreneurship. We also have some incredible resources within the NDSS employment program. Our Partnering for Career Success guide highlights inclusive workplace practices and employment stories of individuals with Down syndrome. Employees with Down syndrome are often visual, kinesthetic learners. Our Guide Me and Watch Me Succeed resource highlights how to model tasks and provides other helpful suggestions to help an employee with Down syndrome succeed. We encourage you to share these with employers, job coaches, VR counselors, and others to help them better understand how to support individuals with Down syndrome as they pursue their employment goals. NDSS also has a number of amazing events coming up, including our National Buddy Walk in New York City and the Times Square video to kick it all off, as well as our Adult Summit, which takes place in November in Southern California. Will be held in Costa Mesa specifically, and it covers aging and Down syndrome through a whole person comprehensive approach. Content will overlap ages and subject matter areas, providing attendees with information and practical resources. This conference is a great educational opportunity for individuals with Down syndrome and other disabilities, family members, and professionals from across the country. We will have a host of amazing speakers and subject matter experts that we're going to bring to that conference. So really look forward to seeing many of you there. We hope you'll join us. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Amanda Myers. Before I formally introduce Amanda, I'd like to share just a bit of information about the organization she works for, Down Syndrome Innovations, formerly Down Syndrome Guild of Greater Kansas City, or DSG. They have spent the last 40 years developing comprehensive support services and programs that other Down syndrome organizations across the United States have been able to replicate. Down Syndrome Innovations assists in mobilizing and connecting providers, employers, and organizations with one another. They take a wraparound approach by collaborating with school districts, caregivers, and community partners. They serve individuals across the lifespan, and including teens, kids, adults, and support individuals through every stage of life. Down Syndrome Innovations has a team of highly trained therapists and specialists that provide direct support daily through occupational therapy, speech therapy, and language therapy, as well as physical and health and wellness areas, mental health, behavior support, employment, and more. Their life-changing support and services help enable people with Down syndrome to live their fullest potential. Amanda Myers is a certified employment support professional who joined Down Syndrome Innovations in April of 2021. She has more than a decade of experience supporting individuals with diverse abilities. Her experience offers adults learning opportunities to develop their vocational skills, coaches them on the job, and supports employers throughout this process. She began her career working with children at a community mental health center where she was awarded Employee of the Year. Following this, she relocated to Vancouver, British Columbia, where she worked as an employment specialist for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Amanda came to Down Syndrome Innovations to build an employment program to address the staffing needs in the community, train employers on how to work with individuals with diverse abilities, and update hiring and onboarding systems. We are very excited to have Amanda join us today. Thank you so much. Amanda, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. So like Ryan mentioned, today we're going to be talking about how to prepare children and adults with Down syndrome for employment. First, we're going to talk about why employment matters. So it really provides a sense of purpose and meaning to our lives, but it's also important to remember that work can look different for everyone. And there's a variety of ways individuals can contribute to their community, even outside of employment. And people can experience very fulfilling lives, even if they're not specifically, working in the community. So it's totally okay. I know we have a lot of different people coming from all around the US today. So it's totally okay if your child isn't motivated to work, is experiencing barriers to employment, is prompt dependent, or maybe is older and you think it's kind of too late and they're not prepared. Today's presentation is really to provide hope and to identify that there's still time to develop their skills if employment is a goal of theirs. And these are folks at the Kansas City Chiefs. You may have heard of them since they recently won a Super Bowl. But yes, they're one of our great partners. So our presentation goals for today, I'm not here to give you more, to add more to your plate, but to shine light into things you're already doing and get you thinking about new ways to incorporate skill building opportunities. We're here to answer the question, where do I start? Where do I even begin? What do I do? And to train you on what an employment specialist does so that you feel equipped with the tools needed to prepare your loved one for the workforce and learn how to access support services through the community providers and online resources available and to leave here feeling inspired no matter what. And we also recognize there's, maybe potential providers or employers that are attending this as well. So hopefully, no matter who you are or who you're with, that you're able to take something away from this seminar. So where do we start with employment? A lot of employment skills are actually started at home. So these are chores that they're doing at home. It's great to use choice boards and task lists. We definitely want to encourage practicing using visuals in the home because employment specialists use these all the time. So getting them used to having a task list on their notes app or saving employee IDs and passwords on the passwords app, using pocket-sized cards. So we laminate little note-sized cards, put them on a key ring, and we use pictures or lists so that it assists with routines. Always make multiple copies so that the employer can have them, or just in case they lose them, they can still have those visuals. And these are really helpful because they're not invasive. They can either just fit into their pocket or on their belt loop. And we also use a lot of social stories. So just knowing, preparing them for what to expect and, kind of professional behaviors. And then we also use timers and alarms quite frequently so they know how to work during those transitional times. When do I clock in? When do I go on my break? When do I come back? When do I leave work? That way they're not having to check their phone. If they do have a phone, they're not having to check that very often. So there's several different types of timers and alarms they can use. There are apps. One is called Countdown. There's also an egg app, where it breaks open an egg and it's very visual and there's pictures. And that really helps with stamina as well. We only have 15 minutes left, and when the picture's complete, then we can go. So timers and alarms are really helpful. If phones are a distraction for them, we love using smartwatches or Fitbits or anything, any type of watch that could help them with those as well. Here are some more examples of other visual reminders. So written and pictures are great for environmental cues that can help support them in the success and independence in a least intrusive way. So we just have a couple other examples of those laminated note cards that we talked about with pictures. A lot of times we'll use Lesson Pics. It's a website where you can download pictures, or you could just take pictures of the actual workplace and put them on those visuals as well. Chunking is something that we use quite frequently. So this is where we take a large task list and divide it into sections and try to only give 2 or 3 tasks at a time. And this is actually how we memorize phone numbers. So it's pretty difficult for us to remember 10 numbers in a row. But if it's 3, 3, and 4, it's a lot easier for our brain to remember those numbers. So we actually use this on a daily basis. And again, we use visuals every day. So we use this whenever we get notifications on our phone or notifications in our car. And this allows us to know that something needs our attention or we need an action to be taken. Visuals are something that never have to be faded out because we use them all the time through calendars, schedules, and various things like that. This is a prompt fading visual. So this is just to familiarize yourself with like what a employment specialist kind of uses. So we're hoping to start in the modeling phase. We're hoping to show someone how to do a task, and then we do it together, and then they do it on their own. And we try to, when we talked about prompt fading or fading out, we try to make sure that next time we're just pointing, or we're using a gesture, or we're looking that direction, or we're using visuals for prompts so that they can be more independent. Or we might ask a question like, what's next? Or how could we solve this problem to get them to solve it on their own? And try not to over prompt because then they get reliant on you being there. And we want to be patient and let them problem solve. So a lot of times we want to jump in and help them solve problems, but really that hinders a learning experience for them where they could try to figure it out for themselves. So you can offer different options too, like, oh, maybe we could try this or that and let them choose and have that, empowerment of choosing how they would like to solve the problem. If we're doing full physical or partial physical, where we're kind of hand over hand job coaching or hand over hand helping them with a task, that's probably going to be something a little trickier to fade out over time. It's going to take us a little bit longer if we're helping that much. So we may need to look at some other jobs that might be a better fit for their skill set if we're providing all those prompts. And verbal is really hard to fade out because you can't fade out your voice. So if you give a verbal prompt and like as a direction, that's okay. But if you keep repeating it over and over verbally, then that's going to be really hard to fade out. So again, we try to use gestures. For example, I had someone working in a restaurant and I needed him to turn to go out to the patio to make sure he wiped all the tables out there. So at first I stood there and pointed, and then the second time I just stood there, and then the third time I was out of the way completely, and he remembered, oh, Amanda used to stand there, and then that means I'm supposed to go this direction. So even us being in the room is a prompt because a person is typically going to work a little differently when someone is in the room supervising them. So employment skills can be taught in everything we do. So we're going to do a little activity together just to start getting our brains thinking about how we can embed these employment skills into activities they're already doing. So this first one, we're going to use the example of baking chocolate chip cookies. Okay, so we're teaching pre-vocational skills without even realizing it. And like when you're going grocery shopping and they have a cart, they're learning spatial awareness. How do I go around people? How do I make sure I don't knock anything off the shelves? Critical thinking and decision making. Is this in the frozen, the freezer, the fridge, or the regular aisles? Where is this located? The ketchup is going to be with the mustard and the mayo, and they have to read the signs. They have to identify the staff, like who could help them if they need a question. What do they look like? Are they wearing a uniform? They're wearing a name badge. They learn if they have enough money or not enough money. And so they're learning all that just in that grocery shopping. So I love doing grocery store like scavenger hunts. We have to find all the items and figure out where they are and remember where to put them back. And then baking. So when we're baking cookies, hygiene, right? We're washing our hands, we're following step-by-step directions on a recipe. We're thinking ahead, we're measuring tools, we're preheating the oven. We're not just sitting and waiting, like we have stuff to do and we can kind of do another task while we're waiting for the oven to be preheated. Emotional regulation, we spill or we're missing an item, what do we do? How do we problem solve that? We're learning technical skills like pouring, stirring, scooping, time management, safety. We're staying busy with tasks while the cookies are cooling off. We're organizing, we're washing, we're drying, we're putting away dishes. So there's so many things that we're learning and that you're teaching them just simply by having them help you in the kitchen. So now we're going to look at expectations of employers. So on the screen, you'll actually see a list of these transferable essential skills that every employer is looking for. And we're going to take an example of how we can embed those in activities they're already doing. So this first example is playing at a park, or they're at a sport or a workout. So they're learning communication. Obviously, like they're playing at a park, they have to talk to each other. They have to get along with other kids that have totally different personalities. They're communicating in a sport, pass me the ball, or in a workout. They're communicating those step-by-step directions or what they need. If they need a water break, they're advocating for themselves. And they understand that nonverbal communication as well. Tone of voice and body language, stamina and endurance. Man, you have to have that when you're in a sport and you're in a workout. You have that physical fitness, you're moving for long periods of time, you're eating healthy, you're staying focused. And then motivation, you have this self-starter energy, you have this willingness to want to do well. And so all of these skills, even though playing at a park or playing soccer has nothing to do with employment, you're gaining all these skills that you're going to need in order to maintain your job long term. Because sometimes it's pretty easy to get a job, it's hard to keep a job, and it's hard to, all these things can end up being barriers if we're gaining weight or we're not wearing comfortable shoes that have great arches in them. And, it can really impact our stamina or our motivation or communication. The next example we're going to look at is cleaning the room. So how could they learn safety and boundaries, task completion and work quality, and hygiene and appearance? So safety and boundaries, obviously, like if your room's a mess, you could trip over, your clothes, let's hang them up. And we're learning boundaries. These are my belongings. You have to ask permission to touch my stuff. Those are your belongings. I need to make sure I respect your items. Task completion and work quality. So my mom's definition of clean is not my definition of clean. So I always have to make sure that I'm cleaning, how she would want me to, and what she would visually see as clean. She thinks that dust is is not clean. So I'm like, okay, I need to see what the expectations are and make sure that I'm completing the entire task to a full and that I'm doing it the way that's expected of my supervisor or of my parent who's watching that. And then hygiene and appearance. We need clean uniforms. We got to do laundry, making sure our hair and our bodies wash, clean and trim toenails. So again, like cleaning our room, that still goes into that hygiene and appearance with clothes, or even making sure that we're, um, you know, using deodorant, our sheets are clean, and different things like that. The next one that we'll look at is performing in a play. So let's say an expectation of an employer is that we have a positive attitude, we're working together as a team, and we're professional and respectful. So when you're performing in a play, you'll probably have to have a positive attitude no matter what role you got. And you'll have to be a team player. It takes everybody learning their lines, knowing where to go. And then professionalism and respectful behaviors are listening to your maybe to your drama director, and learning like what's okay here, maybe at a school play versus what's okay at home, or what we talk about with different people. That can be really tricky. What can I talk about with my friends compared to maybe someone who's in charge? And also learning like to take turns when we're reading scripts and acknowledge other people's feelings, what's in our control, what's out of our control. Because we're not able to control everything when a play is given to us and it's a certain amount of lines. And sometimes we may have, again, a stamina where it's like, oh, I only have 30 minutes left and then I'll be done. So we're learning all of those skills, even just in a school play. The next one is an example of like their evening routine. So they're brushing their teeth, they're showering, they're getting ready for bed. So how could they be learning relationships? Again, like meeting new people, managing different kinds of relationships, what's appropriate versus not. So maybe in your evening routine, you've got siblings and it's, oh, like, okay, this is what brother does. This is what sister does. This is what's expected of the parents, different ages that you have to like, oh, he can do this because he's older. He can stay up late. You're younger. So you're learning all these different dynamics and how to manage those. Mental health. So you're learning how to take appropriate breaks or time off when needed. You're getting enough rest in your evening routine. You are setting your alarm. You're being responsible and you're taking care of your mental health. Maybe you're reading a story before bed to calm yourself and get yourself into that nightly routine. And then technology, using your phones appropriately. Employers want to make sure that you're using social media safety or safely, understanding like different texting. This is probably for older children, kind of what's appropriate. And then, using your phone on breaks, not while you're working. So in your evening routine, it's maybe electronics are off by a certain time, and we're learning how to manage that and not stay up all night on our phones. Their morning routine. So an employer is expecting an individual to be managing their time wisely, emotional regulation, and independence. So in their morning routine, you may, how long do I need to get ready? Like, how long does it take me to get ready to make sure I get to school on time? Emotional regulation, like handling stress when I'm rushed. We got traffic or missed my alarm, and practice coping skills, using timers and alarms, and then independence, like following a routine, being responsible. I've packed my lunch, I set out my clothes. All those things are teaching them employment skills, even though it's just their morning routine. Doing homework, so being flexible, able to change if needed, which is a tricky thing for all of us. Following directions, resilience and adversity, those are things that we all need to learn. And if you're doing homework, sometimes you have to be flexible. You don't want to do something, but you have to do it. It's got to get done. Or you can first do something easy, then something hard. Following directions, again, sometimes you don't want to do it, got to do it. And knowing the difference between individual and group instruction, accepting feedback, admitting if we made a mistake, and then not giving up when we fail and having that resilience and adversity to problem solve through it. The other one is playing a game or doing a puzzle. So expectation of employers that you're confident, you're committed, you're advocating for yourself and problem solving. So again, like you're willing to try something new. It's great when you can do something based on your skills, but life isn't always like that. We got to learn how to do something new and challenge ourselves a little bit. Even when we get tired, there's always going to be pros and cons to a job, even when you're in the dream job. And saying no when necessary, like, no, I'm not able to play this game, or I'm not able to do this because I'm not skilled in that. And then problem solving. So small problem, I solve it myself. Big problem, I ask for help, and knowing how to respond appropriately. So you're doing that when you're playing games continuously. And so job coaches, the whole reason why we do this activity is for you to realize like, whoa, you're already teaching employment skills. And a job coach can help teach a task and create resources and assist with transitions. But these skills that we just went over are really, really hard for an employment specialist to train in a short amount of time, and they can all impact your employment. So they're really important. They all intertwine and impact each other. And it's really important that they're working on these skills in the home every day, because that's going to make such a bigger difference than us just trying to work with them once a week or a few weeks at the beginning of a job. So there's also some technical skills. These are just, using simple locks instead of combination ones if they have them, because usually you have a locker at work where you put your stuff away. Learning how to tie an apron. That way you can be more independent. You're not relying on someone to tie it for you. Hopefully it can wrap around all the way to the front. That's an easy little trick. And then name tags. These can be really hard, magnetic, clip-on safety. So again, trying to teach those like fine motor skills is really, really helpful. And you can also set up the environment to optimize skill development. So let's say they're coloring. Don't give them colored pencils and they have to go find them or they have to ask. Let them run out of supplies. Don't completely replenish the paper because then they're like, oh, mom will always do this for me. Ask them to complete tasks and then check in with you. Hey, let's do 3 and then let me know when you're finished and I'll give you more paper. So they learn to check in with a supervisor or check in with somebody. We all want to jump in and help, but again, when we do that, we're actually making it so that they don't learn how to move on to that next step and they're relying on someone to do it for them. So less is better. When you feel like you're doing nothing and you're like in the back just kind of supervising and like that's when they're gaining independence and that's actually the best that you could do for them. So let's say they're ready for a job. They have all these skills, they're ready to go. So we'll talk about obtaining employment and kind of where to start with that. Identify their skills and interest. So don't just go off what they say. They might say, oh, I want to do this, but really they have no idea what that looks like. They've seen it in a movie or they've seen pictures. And ideas of jobs can be misconstrued. We have so many people that say, I love to work with pets, but they do not want to clean up the mess. They do not, they want to pet a dog all day. They do not want to actually take care of a dog. Or they love the Kansas City Chiefs, but we always have people work a couple preseason games because then they're like, what? I don't get to watch the game. I don't get to meet Patrick Mahomes. I have to actually work. And so it's always good just have them go do it. I can't emphasize that enough. Just like go in the community, do it. And that's the only way, that's the best way that they're going to see what the environment is really like and what the expectations of the job actually are. And try to think about the underlying skill or what's meaningful to them, not just the surface level activity. So, yeah, we want to make sure that they like maybe they want to feel part of a team or they want to feel productive when they work with their hands. So I had an individual that was wanting to work in an office and I took her to a warehouse just for like a little assessment. And she said, Amanda, this is my dream job. I was like, what? This has nothing to do with an office. This is the opposite. It's loud, it's noisy, it's not administrative work. And we realized the underlying skill was that she liked to work with her hands. She was so used to filing and organizing and sorting and shredding. And the underlying skill was that she just liked assembling the boxes and putting items into it. And so that was a huge like light bulb moment for us where we found that underlying skill and what was meaningful to them. Again, not just what they like or what they're good at, but what they actually feel good about and good doing. And a lot of times it's not the money. Money is not a motivator, as you know, for a lot of people. It's the perks. It's the, oh, I get a free meal at work, or I get to, work with these individuals. I get free tickets to the zoo because I work there. So a lot of times it has to do with the perks and not just the money. And is it identifying if it's an interest, if it's a strength or a distraction? So maybe someone loves clothes, but if they worked at a retail store, they would shop all day. And that would actually be really distracting for their job. I know I would do that. So I could never work in a retail place. Or their area of employment that might be hard. They are interested in something that might be harder to get into. So we have individuals that want to be actresses or they want to be singers. So it's great. Like we can make a plan on how to achieve the goal or know it's okay to have hobbies or volunteer somewhere. We all have things that we like to do that are not paid employment. I love to go, I love to go wakeboarding. I'm never going to get paid to go wakeboarding or I'm not that good. So we have other people where it's like, oh, I want to sing. Great. Like we have an employment specialist on our team that sings and she crochets and like she does all these things, but they're not necessarily paid employment. They're just hobbies. And that's totally okay. We all have things like that. So it's helpful to teach them that too. Not everything has to be a paid job. And again, the best way to explore is going to unfamiliar places and participating in a variety of tasks with a variety of different people. The more places that they get exposed to, the bigger their world gets, right? So just go to a ton of places, even if they're not familiar. And even if they want to go with a support worker, they don't want to go with mom or they don't want to go with dad. Maybe they want to go with a friend or a brother or a sibling, but just get them out in the community with different people, different jobs all over. And the environment is just as important as the job itself. So we think about location, right? Even when we're looking for a job, I don't want to drive an hour to my job. Sometimes we don't have the option, but ideally it's something close to home. We're looking at lighting, the noises, the hours, the people, the cleanliness, the work attire. So make sure you can see so much just how they act in an environment, in a new place. Are they more reserved? Are they more talkative? Do they seem more like themselves? And again, sometimes they're always looking to mom or they're always looking to a caregiver for reassurance. So maybe they go with someone else. They go with a professional, or you're in the back or drop them off or whatever that looks like for you. But just getting them exposed to the environment is huge. And then where do I start looking for a job? So start in your neighborhood, tour stores, identify jobs people are working. A lot of times people think grocery and they just think someone who's bagging or a cashier. And there's a lot of people that are stocking and facing. There's people in the back that are help with shipping and receiving. There's so many different jobs there to identify. So that's super helpful. Even if you live in a rural neighborhood, there's still places to go, things to do, hopefully, within a reasonable amount of driving that they could go to. Job shadowing and informational interviews. So these are just questions, like they make a list of questions like, what does a typical day look like? How did you get your job? How much money do you earn? What would you recommend for me? Like, how do I get started? So they can learn about a job from someone who is already an experienced employee by just watching them and asking questions. Volunteering is great, volunteering for nonprofits or at a religious center or just any volunteering in the community. Work experiences are great too. So these are for-profit companies. You can do a short-term work experience or an internship, which is great for discovery, trying new places for a short time and seeing if you like it. And then we call these working interviews. So instead of a sit-down interview where they are at a table, let's, try the job and see if it's a good fit. And if they're not able to do that, some workplaces can't do that just because of safety policies and things. At least they can get a tour and like meet the people and just see if it's a good kind of culture fit for what they're looking for or if the environment is a good fit. And these are common job sites to get started. We have a lot of individuals that work in grocery, hotels, hospitality, home and garden, sporting events, hospitals, banks, coffee shops, and bakeries. But individuals can work in many other different places. So when I think about my first job, it was in one of these, kind of entry level positions, and that's totally okay to start there. But it's also okay to encourage career development. I didn't know an employment specialist was a position until I got pretty far into my career. So we want to make sure that we allow individuals the opportunity to either move up the ladder in their own job or be able to find a different job after a few years. Your first job doesn't have to be your last. And I think that's a really important key takeaway. And we also want to be proactive. A lot of the jobs that individuals with diverse abilities are in may fade after technology kind of kicks in. We see a lot of self-checkouts now instead of bagging groceries. We see a lot of fast food places moving to drive-throughs instead of having little cafes in them. So it's really important that they're always skill building and that they're always learning new tasks, new jobs. That way, whenever the industry changes, they aren't out of a job and they've actually prepared themselves to stay employed long term. And how to access employment support. So meet with your local agency. This is usually a one-stop shop where federal and state programs provide funding. The tricky thing about this is that every state calls them something different. So in Kansas, they're called CDDOs, or Community Developmental Disabilities Organizations. In Missouri, they're called Kansas City Regional Offices, KCROs, because we're located in Kansas City. We serve both states. We also have services virtually that we can do all over the US, but we have these different organizations that are here. So yeah, just make sure that you talk and learn from other families that have children with diverse abilities. And sometimes there's even county specific agencies, not just state, but county, that have funding to support individuals in employment. So really try to find these early on, as early as possible, even if your child is not at an employable age yet. If they're 6 years old, be looking at this because there's long wait lists. There's long, or sometimes there can be long wait lists depending on what state you're in to have access to these services that can get you funding for employment support. So please make sure it's never too early to start. It's also never too late to start either. Please just make sure you get connected with your any agencies in your area. Vocational rehabilitation is a big one. You'll hear this as VR. So VR counselors create career plans with goals, assist with job development and support in employment, and then pre-vocational training, like assistance with resumes, applications, and things like this. So yeah, I think we could pull a few questions to ask. It looks like Ryan was maybe have a few questions. Oh, never mind. They said we're good. We'll keep going. Okay, sounds good. So we'll save them for the end. How to access employment support. So a lot of times these are called developmental disabilities associations. So you're thinking Medicaid, waivers, or MCOs are managed care organizations. Those are kind of the insurance companies that will often pay for services for individuals. So coordinators can provide similar supports as VR, but Medicaid and waiver is typically long-term. So vocational rehab is kind of for pre-vocational and getting you a job and keeping it for 90 days. And then the Medicaid or waiver kind of kicks in for those if a person needs long-term support. Cases can usually be reopened again, so that if something happens, it's pretty inevitable that, managers turnover, staff turnover, the job changes, that, you may need to reopen your case with someone, and that's okay. Or they start with VR and or they didn't qualify because, they needed some more support. So just helping, getting connected with these organizations will help them know like what your self-advocate is qualified for. And we use the term self-advocate for individuals with diverse abilities. So what they're, eligible for based on kind of their needs and levels of supports. And then there's benefit specialist. So you can work and not lose your benefits. So this is a common misconception. A lot of people don't want to lose benefits, but you can. So you can meet with a benefit specialist, that's what they're called, to kind of look at your Social Security or we call them like SSI or SSDI. Those are like the government assistance programs. If your child is getting a check, you can meet with a benefit specialist to say, how can they work and still maintain benefits at the same time? And get connected with your local nonprofit organization. So Project Search is a big one, Gigi's Playhouse, Best Buddies. Our organization is also free or private pay. So a lot of the things that we do are free or heavily subsidized by grants and donors and affordable to parents. So we try to fill, organizations like this try to fill the gaps where if people are on wait lists or they're not receiving the services they need, then there are usually some nonprofit organizations that are able to make sure to get them going until those can kick in. And just so you know who to ask for, the staff at these agencies are called employment specialists or job coaches, case coordinators, counselors, job developers, and they act as a professional liaison between the employer and the individual. If you're not getting anywhere, maybe ask for a different counselor or seek a different provider. There's lots of options, hopefully, out there where you could, again, try something else if it's not working. And networking, talk to your family, your neighbors, your friends, like see like, oh, this person works here or is networked with this person. Look at internet websites. Indeed.com is, a lot of like job searching or Glassdoor. Again, I would not rely on these solely for, it's great to submit an application, but we want to make sure that you have a professional and employment specialist that's calling to follow up or that already has a relationship built with an employer. But you can also attend job fairs. This is great for kids to get out there and realize, like, how can I talk to someone? What questions do I ask? How do I learn more about a job? And then work experiences, short term, preferably paid at a livable wage is great, if possible. I've done unpaid internships, or unpaid work experiences when I was in school. But any experience is great, especially if it's paid. And just remember, finding a job takes time, especially if resources are limited or a person is really specific on what they want to do, or they're experiencing barriers to employment, or there's things outside of their control. So just try to keep things moving by having them in the community as much as possible, even if it's like social groups or, any team activities. Just try to keep them as involved in as much as possible so they're still developing those skills and they actually don't regress in their skill development just because there are things that aren't working out. You can create or update a resume. So we use video resumes using iMovie or Google templates. We want to use professional language so we can make something sound really good, even though it was just cleaning tables and trays. We could say we ensured businesses complied with environmental sanitation requirements by performing cleaning duties in a hospital setting, or instead of chopped vegetables, we worked as a team preparing food in a fast-paced industrial kitchen. Like, you want to show the skills that you developed and what you learned in that environment. Parents and supporters may need to assist with applications, just because sometimes they have online assessments that are really tricky and have questions they want you to answer. And then you can always ask common interview questions, preparing them for an interview. Have a friend call and do one over the phone. Sometimes people do phone interviews, so you want them to be prepared for that. And have a transportation plan. That's usually the biggest barrier, so make sure you're looking at paratransit, rideshare, or connecting with other individuals. We have a lot of families that carpool for places that we have a lot of people employed at, or just get creative with their transportation. They're hired, now what? So we want to make sure that we're helping with orientation and onboarding, making sure that your employment specialist or BR counselor, whoever you're working with, has all the information they need. So we need parents to be on board. Providers need you to help with transportation, scheduling, direct deposit, tax forms. We want to make sure that we're always having good communication with the providers, building good relationships. And remembering employment takes time. There are things outside of their control too. A lot of times they're understaffed and have a lot of clients on their caseload as well. And ask the provider to be fully transparent with you so you can help with strategies that work at home, so they can implement them in the workplace. I always ask parents, like, how do you motivate them, or how do you get them to comply with certain directions? And I'll use skills that they've used in the home in the workplace, because we know that your self-advocates a lot better than we do. And make sure employers feel supported. We respect their systems, what they feel comfortable with and what they can allow. All businesses are different, and it really takes all of us working together to make it a successful employment opportunity for your self-advocate. So maintaining employment. When issues occur at work, it usually has nothing to do with the job itself. So it's hygiene. Maybe they wipe their nose and touch the food instead of washing their hands or wearing gloves. They need to understand the rules, like, oh, I have to buy this on my break or eat it on my break. or I can't eat food off the trays when I'm bussing tables. Next slide. So how to avoid these issues? Either choose a different workplace where that's not an issue, learn the rules of that environment, keep good communication with the employer, resolve these at the very beginning so they're not a problem. Things can look worse than they really are. So someone's just late because they need to take an earlier bus, or they're coming back from a break late because they need to actually set their timer for 10 minutes to be able to be back on the floor in 15 minutes. So it's usually a really easy fix by setting an alarm or a visual, but make sure to always capture those at the beginning so they don't turn into bigger issues. Have a transition plan, how to continue that relationship after the provider fades out. Again, we talked about reopening a case if needed, expect turnover. That's obviously going to happen. Train lots of natural supports, lots of staff. Expect their job to change. We talked about that a little bit, and always be teaching new skills. That way they're always working on those skill building opportunities. Here are some resources. We have RSA, which is the Rehabilitation Services Administration, Job Accommodation Network, Pacer Center. These have a lot of online resources. We'll also supply you with some interest inventories, common interview questions, and ideal conditions of employment to try to get a base of like, where do we even start looking for a job? And use what you already have at home. You're already using probably calendars, smartphones, watches, alarms. We use boom cards. So if you go to boomcards.com, there's like, they can put together ice cream orders. There's different levels, 1, 2, or 3, like based on their skill level. Teachers Pay Teachers is where we find a lot of like free or inexpensive resources that are already made out there. Lesson Picks, again, like on those visuals, you could see like the pictures that we captured. These are all free or very inexpensive resources that we'll use for some pre-vocational and visuals once they're hired on a job. And so your action items today are hopefully just incorporate vocational skill building into activities they're already doing based on what you learned in this seminar today. Get connected with your local agencies, providers, and organizations, and then just start getting them out in the community, gaining experiences, no matter what that looks like or who it's with. Just provide as much as a variety as possible as often as you can. So we want to thank you so much for attending. I know we covered a lot. It's a really big, employment's a really big topic to cover in such a short amount of time. So if you do have any questions or want to learn more about our organization, feel free to contact us. Like I said, we do virtual employment consultations for free. And we do that, anywhere in the US. And we have several other ways to try to help your self-advocate if they're wanting to get into employment.
Fantastic. Amanda, thank you so much. We really appreciate you attending and sharing your knowledge and experience with this audience. I do want to make a few just reminders, quick announcements. So this slide deck and this presentation will be made available to all who have attended in the days to come. So we hope to have that out to you all in the next 48 hours or so. That's also going to be available, this recording, on our YouTube channel. So the National Down Syndrome Society's YouTube channel will be where this presentation lives for the foreseeable future. So if you'd like to come back and revisit, or if you'd like to look at some of these slides again and take notes, or even be able to reference some of these pieces as you're entering into an IEP transition meeting or a job coaching session or something along those lines, of course, you're more than welcome to do that. I do want to also make a quick announcement for those who have to drop. We've got about 5 minutes for a Q&A, which we're going to still do with Amanda. But immediately following this webinar, you'll have an opportunity to complete a short survey. We'll ask that you take some time to do that. Would love to get your feedback regarding today's presentation, as well as any suggestions or ideas that you have for future webinars. Your feedback is incredibly important to us. It is what we use to fuel the next series of webinars and resources and information we share. And I know that Amanda and DSI do the same and really continue to hone their craft and their offering to the community based on your feedback. So please take some time to do that today. And I did try to answer a few of the questions in the chat, but a few that stood out, Amanda, and maybe some that we kind of already answered, but you have some additional thoughts on. So one is my son is graduating from high school. He's 18. He's nonverbal. What type of job programs are available to high school grads in this age range? And this parent is wanting to enroll this person in a program and seek job placement by the fall. So one of the points that I wanted to just double down on, and I'll turn it over to you, is that employment is I like to say hyper localized. So there are things that exist in your community that may not exist in communities around the country. So there are some incredible programs like Project Search. We talked about the Gigi's Playhouses, and there's some other amazing things. Vocational rehabilitation is a great way to plug into job coaching and getting connected through some of those nuts and bolts pieces and planning opportunities for employment. So it does tend to depend on where you are located, and so those can present some different opportunities or challenges based on where you are. So I'll turn it back over to you, Amanda. Do you have any other thoughts on this for a parent planning for transition from high school?
Yeah, so some states or counties have like 18 to 21 transition programs for students. Some like school districts offer those. There's also, if you're going to do something over the summer, a lot of employers will do like summer work experiences. We know the Kansas City Royals baseball team does that for us locally. So there could be some like summer work experiences or internships that they could do. There's also community colleges. We have like Johnson County Community College offers like the Clear and Connect program. So sometimes they'll have courses that individuals could take that are specifically for individuals with diverse abilities, or there's some different colleges if they're looking at that route as well. So yeah, hopefully there's a little bit of whether it's through schools or employers, some different ways to do that. Again, even volunteering somewhere is super great, even just a couple days a week, finding somewhere to volunteer over the summer or um, get involved, anything is great.
That's awesome. There was another question in the chat about NDSS specifically. Do we have local offices? So one thing I do think is important to mention is that there are over 250 Down syndrome affiliate groups across the country. The National Down Syndrome Society is a non-membership organization. However, we do still provide information resources via webinars like this, as well as print resources and our downloadable guides that we mentioned earlier on the presentation. We provide this information to the Down syndrome affiliate groups as well. We do have a map that displays local support and these different affiliates, sort of an interactive map on our website where you can get in touch with a local Down syndrome group in your area. And hopefully there's one close to all of you. Not all of them have an employment program and the staff or like what you've heard from Amanda at DSI, but many do have connections to some of these services and other training programs in the community. So would encourage you to take a look at our interactive map and locate a Down syndrome affiliate group near you. All right, let's do another question. This one says, as an employer, how do I find out about grants available so that we can expand and increase inclusive hiring?
Yeah, so as an employer, there are different grants that are available. There's different like tax credits, like a work opportunity tax credit, WOTC, that you may qualify for. So there are different, you'd have to see if your employer kind of qualifies for it, but like we have a registered apprenticeship program through the Department of Labor that helps them get on the job learning, and we got grant funded to provide job coaches there. So yeah, that's a good question. We also offer employer trainings on how to work with individuals with diverse abilities. We can do that virtually or in person. So we offer that as well, just to try to help people get familiarized with that and kind of improving those systems like hiring and onboarding and getting them to be more inclusive. I noticed one of the other questions was like, do you provide classes to prepare job coaches? Again, we do trainings for providers as well, just so we can learn from each other and collaborate on like best practices and what's working for us, what's working for other organizations. So we do a lot of collaboration as well. And there are a lot of trainings out there for job coaches. And that are online or in person through different national organizations that a lot of employment specialists are enrolled in, whether that's APSE, APSE. A lot of people are certified employment support professionals, and that's a national level, or WISE is another one. So there's a lot of trainings out there for employment professionals and providers.
Another technical question for this webinar specifically, several have asked about a certificate of participation. Yes, we can send out certificates of participation to all of those who were actually on the webinar today. Those are not continuing education units. Just want to be really clear with that. This is just a document that says NDSS saw that you registered and that you attended. I'm happy to send those documents along following this presentation.
Someone else asked about being an entrepreneur. That's one thing we actually didn't touch on today too, like self-employment. And I think Ryan, you could touch a little bit on that too. There's a lot of people that end up starting their own business based on like hobbies that they started or enterprises. I know we have the Golden Scoop is an ice cream store here that's now opening their second location. They employ people with diverse abilities. So I don't know if you have anything on that, Ryan, about like kind of self-employment.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are connected to a number of tremendous business owners and operators who have Down syndrome. There are a number of folks featured on our website. We mentioned some of the success stories. We also have a page dedicated to highlighting these businesses that are being recognized across the United States. I will say that we've also heard from the community that some of these early conversations around startup and whether or not entrepreneurship is the right fit for your son, daughter, or loved one with Down syndrome it led us to developing an entrepreneurship guide in partnership with an organization called Celebrate EDU, which is a tremendous organization that really looks to help individuals and families think through those startup stages and helping kind of bring this business idea to market, whatever your business idea may be. So we do have a guide that's available on our website. It is our entrepreneurship guide. I will say that it is very much the conversation starter. A lot of times I think there's a very romanticized view as to what entrepreneurship looks like. I think people think I'm owning my own business. I'm going to drive a fancy car and I'm going to make my own schedule and everyone's going to answer to me. We ask questions in that guide like, are you comfortable not taking a paycheck for the first year? Because that is really the truth behind what it can be like to start your own business. Certainly not for the faint of heart. But yes, we do have additional resources and some incredible connections in the community. We also have some great plans as a part of the employment program strategic plan to launch a few other business to business and mentorship type programs in the near future. So stay tuned for that.
Awesome. There's another question on how to get businesses to agree to have individuals come and work there as an intern. A lot of times it's all about our relationship, like a provider's relationship with the employer. Once that trust and that rapport is there, they're usually really open. They want to hire more people. And again, we're just helping businesses become more efficient. We want everyone to work at the highest scope of their role. And so that's how we get into customizing or carving a position to fill needs of companies. And they'll see all the benefits and want to rehire because they have less turnover. They have people that show up, do the job, follow the rules. And it's a great fit for their culture. So if they aren't willing to kind of do a work experience or an internship, you could just go down a little bit lower and say, like, could we come in for a tour? You don't even have to have permission to go into a store and just like walk around and help your self-advocate identify the different jobs or talk with some of the staff. Like that's something that you could do, even if you weren't doing something like super in depth. And then someone asked about like reporting income and about benefits, how much money can they make, or if so, how many hours. So again, like if they're on SSDI, which is the disability income, the max amount per month is $1,550, depending on where you're at and how much they're making. That's usually around like 20 to 25 hours a week. But SSI is not the same. So if they're on SSI, that's something completely different. And there's kind of a spend down method. Again, check with your benefit specialist or check with a provider. That way you can know, because they're usually not reaching that maximum limit and just kind of familiarize with the system. They really do want to encourage you to work. So make sure that you're figuring out how your self-advocate can work and put that funding towards those hours and make sure that it's still working in a way that works for your family. So always, always, always talk with a benefit specialist because your situation is totally independent from everyone else's.
All right. Well, I know that we're a few minutes over, and we had sort of anticipated some great questions. Please, again, feel free to reach out to our team at employment@ndss.org, and we'll put Amanda's information here as well, so that you all can connect with her and get some more information from her. I do want to make one other quick announcement that, again, immediately following this webinar, we'll have a short survey. We invite you to share your feedback. This is incredibly valuable to NDSS and DSI, so that we can continue to bring you this information and continue to improve on the work that we're doing and how we're serving this community. Thank you all so much again for joining us for today's webinar. Before we close, I'd like to take another moment to thank Amanda Myers again for being an incredible speaker and presenter, bringing some incredible subject matter expertise. And if you have any further questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to us at employment@ndss.org. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks,
Thank you.
Amanda.
Thank you.